Hello, and welcome to today's installment of the International News Daily Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Dennis Donicic. We're going to end this week just like we started it, with two of the week's most major stories, which are the earthquakes in Haiti and the situation in Afghanistan. So let's get right to it. The situation in Haiti is unfortunately not getting any better. While foreign aid, specifically from the United States, has been able to actually make it into the country and has effectively helped response efforts, logistically figuring out the exact number of victims, finding people lost in the rubble, and helping out survivors has maintained a level of extreme difficulty. One of the most major problems in Haiti has been finding a specific death toll and finding out where all the bodies are. Currently, the Haitian Civil Service states that there are a total of 2,200 presumed victims, as in dead. 12,200 people are presumed to be injured. One question was asked by a journalist today and many other people over the week. 2,200 people is a lot of bodies. It's a lot of dead people for a country of 11 million. Where are these bodies? And what I'm going to report to you right now is a bit of an unfortunate and disturbing truth. In Haitian culture, there is a very direct and close relationship between the living and the dead. And also because of economic reasons, sometimes people just do not have the financial resources to properly bury their family members. These 2,200 victims, many of them have been buried in government cemeteries or private funeral homes, but a significant amount have been buried privately in front of someone's front yards, in front of private homes. In Haiti, the average cost to bury a family member is $500 United States dollars. This sum may seem little to most of my Western watchers and viewers today, but to what is the poorest nation in the Northern Hemisphere, Haiti, the poorest nation in the Northern Hemisphere, $500 is a small fortune. In such a short notice, as an earthquake, where loved ones died unexpectedly, unannounced, outside of natural causes, many families have been unable to provide this kind of expense and have simply been burying their dead in their homes. This has caused the response to be even more difficult, as response units have to think of digging through rubble and finding different remains. They're actually finding remains of people who have already been accounted for, people who have intentionally been buried. And it's becoming difficult to tell apart who is a new victim and who is someone that has actually been privately buried. Will this situation be resolved? We will see. What is very clear is that the Haitian people need more foreign aid. Haitian families need financial aid. They need financial help. They need the ability to properly bury their loved ones. In addition to the private individuals not having the financial resources to provide a proper funeral for their loved ones, government hospitals are finding themselves overrun without electricity. Private funeral homes are having to take over this burden. Unfortunately, they do not have the ability to take care of this many bodies and this many victims. Basically, Haiti is a mess. Hopefully the next time that I report on this issue, and hopefully I don't have to report on this issue at all in the future. Hopefully it gets resolved over the weekend, but I will honestly say that I'm doubtful. But if it isn't resolved, we'll talk more about it. We'll see where the situation's going, and maybe we can even discuss in the comments how we can help the people of Haiti out. We're going to move forward to our next story, which is going to be a little bit longer. It's actually two stories in one, and both are involving, surprise, you guessed it, Afghanistan. The Taliban have continued their siege on power. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the week and in my other reports, they have publicly stated and promised that they are going to be more modern, progressive, and a more accepting, inclusive Islamic government. Recent reports and recent actions by the Taliban, however, have not been constructive and have not been in collusion with the statements of the Taliban. Violent reactions to protests in certain provinces, specifically Jalalabad, where Afghani protesters removed the Taliban flag and replaced it with the Afghani Republic flag, resulting in one individual being killed by Taliban responses, have caused people to question whether or not the Taliban is being genuine. In addition to this, Amnesty International filed a formal complaint and report today that during the Taliban siege and surge of the Afghanistani Republic, so before they took power, between the dates of July 4th and July 6th, in the province of Ghazni, that Taliban fighters killed in cold blood, point blank, 9 members of the Hazara ethnic minority. The Hazara are a Shiite Muslim ethnic minority that have historically been targeted by the Taliban. Eyewitnesses provided accounts stating that 6 Hazara men were shot point blank while 3 were tortured to death. This is an unpleasant subject, but it is one that has been reported and that I need to report to you. In addition to this, many videos have surfaced online of the Taliban reacting extremely violently on Afghanistan's Independence Day to individuals carrying the Afghanistani national flag, the tricolor flag, which has, after the Taliban's appraisal of power, become a symbol of resistance to their rule. Now, these actions, these acts of violence, these acts of totalitarianism mean one of two things. When the Taliban is saying, we are modern, we are progressive, we are democratic, but their soldiers are committing acts of violence, they are beating people, they are killing people, one of two things is going on. Either number one, the Taliban is not being honest. They are saying one thing and doing another, which in and of itself is alarming. But there's also option number two, which somehow is actually even worse. The Taliban, the leadership of the Taliban, intends to institute this kind of government. However, they are unable to control their forces. The Taliban took over Afghanistan extremely rapidly, very quickly, leading to logistical problems. When one province is falling after another province, after another province, after another province, commanders are being placed in charge where they normally would not have been. And certain commanders are taking complete control of their troops and telling them what to do. This could potentially result in schisms, in fractures within Taliban ranks, which could actually lead to more conflict in Afghanistan, meaning that the war is not over. Even if the United States and the Western-backed coalition and NATO is no longer present in the country of Afghanistan, another war could break out if this is the case. The Taliban is finding itself facing a very difficult dilemma. On one end, it has to appease the international community, which expects it to be democratic, to be free, to be more accepting and more liberal. While on the other side, they are faced with their fundamental Islamic soldiers who helped, who without them, they would not have come to power. These soldiers are the basis of the Taliban. They're the basis of their power. They are the grunts that ensure that this government stays alive. But on the other hand, there's another issue that could crush not just the Taliban, but Afghanistan if the future government is not careful. And that issue is, like it is in many cases, money. Recently this week, I reported on how Germany already stated that it would remove 250 million euros of pledged foreign aid to Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country that doesn't just get help from foreign aid. It absolutely relies upon foreign aid to build its growing economy. Currently, the Afghanistani Central Bank holds $9 billion, United States dollars, in reserves to ensure the stability of the Afghanistani currency. This being said, the Taliban does not have access to this money. The individual and institution that controls this money is in fact the New York Federal Reserve, the United States government. And Joe Biden has stated that he doesn't know if the Taliban wants to have an internationally recognized nation, specifically stating he believes that they're having an existential crisis. If the Taliban keeps acting in a way that is not acceptable to the United States, it's going to use its last leverage chip, which is these reserves, the $9 billion in the Federal Reserve. In addition to this, the IMF has pledged $450 million to the Taliban. Now, the United States may have been somewhat humiliated and degraded on the international scene, but it is still one of the world's major superpowers. It still holds probably the most amount of influence in the IMF. If the United States says no, the Taliban is not going to receive this money. If the Taliban keeps acting in the way that it has in the recent weeks since it's taken power, it's going to be viewed as a bad guy on the international scale, and it's not going to receive this foreign aid. And this is going to create major economic problems for the Taliban to face in Afghanistan. It needs to be understood that the last time the Taliban had power in Afghanistan was 2001. Since then, the Afghan economy has tripled. It has grown 3 times in size, tripled in GDP. In addition to this, it is an extremely reliant economy on imports. The Afghanistan, had an average annual import of 8 billion United States dollars, which is 10 times more than the nation's exports. And pardon my French, but that is a fucked up trade deficit. In addition to this, the last time the Taliban took power, the average Afghanistani was living off of $1 a day. Afghanistan's economy has become much more urbanized. It has grown, but it is still reliant on foreign imports. It is still reliant on foreign aid. It is still reliant on the international community. If the Taliban chooses to have an authoritarian, closed-off regime, it is going to face economic problems, and it has already shown that it is having trouble controlling its soldiers. What happens when they run out of money to pay those soldiers, to feed those soldiers? What happens to this region? Will there be peace, or will war continue? We're certainly going to find out, and I'm probably going to be reporting on it. I somehow keep finding myself back in Afghanistan. I want to thank you for joining us on the International News Daily podcast this week. This is our first week. I would like to remind you to please subscribe. We want to grow. I want to make this my full-time job. I want to invest all the time I have in this. We want to support independent journalism. We want to support unbiased journalism, and we want to support an open discussion of global issues. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.